She didn't scream. She didn't argue. She stood up from the table where his powerful family mocked her and walked out with every piece of her dignity. Months later, they begged her for help, and she didn't move. Have you ever stayed silent, not because you were weak, but because you knew your peace mattered more than proving your worth? This story isn't about revenge. It's about what happens when a quiet woman becomes unshakable. And the billionaire who broke her heart realizes she was the strongest person in every room he ever entered. Welcome to Mr. Charles Stories. Let's begin. Leora arrived in Atlanta with one suitcase, a folded bus ticket in her back pocket, and a list of cheap apartments scribbled inside a paperback novel. She had no interest in the spotlight. She wasn't chasing dreams of luxury. She didn't want power, applause, or attention. She wanted something most people overlooked: a stable life, a quiet space, and a job that didn't ask her to become someone else just to survive it. She'd grown up in a town where people knew when your father left and remembered what your mother sold to keep food on the table. Her strength wasn't loud. It was built across years of cleaning dishes, walking to school through storms, and never asking anyone to lower the bar for her. When she got to Atlanta, she moved into a small studio apartment on the edge of the city, the kind with thin walls and a heater that groaned through the night. But it was hers. Clean. Paid for. Honest. She applied for dozens of jobs. Some never replied. Some asked for more than she could give. Then, one morning, dressed in a simple button-down blouse and black flats she bought at a thrift shop, she stepped into the marble lobby of Valter Holdings. She'd done her research. They were one of the most powerful family-owned private firms in Georgia. They built hospitals, funded foundations, held stock in half the city's real estate. Their name made doors open. She didn't expect much. The job was for front desk reception, steady hours, benefits, just enough room to breathe. The HR coordinator, a woman in grey with sharp glasses, looked her up and down. "Tell me," she said, "what makes you think you'd be a fit here?" Leora smiled. "I don't gossip. I don't quit when it's hard. I learn fast. And I don't need a corner office to give my best." The woman blinked once, then wrote something down. 2 days later, they called. She got the job. The first week was quiet. She greeted clients, organized mail, and kept to herself. She didn't talk to executives. She didn't stare too long at the marble columns or the designer heels some women wore that cost more than her rent. She stayed in her lane. Kind, precise, invisible. Until one morning, she heard his voice. "Is this the updated contract schedule?" Deep, measured, slightly tired, like someone who worked too long and thought too much. She looked up. Arian Valtor stood in front of her desk. The Arian Valtor, the firm's heir, youngest board member. A man whispered about in the halls like a ghost you didn't make eye contact with. He wore a charcoal suit, no tie, and an expression that gave nothing away. His hair was swept back, his jawline sharp, but it was his eyes that unsettled her, focused, unreadable, calm, in a way that made everyone else feel exposed. Leora handed him the file without fumbling. "Yes. It was updated this morning." He glanced down, flipped through a few pages, then paused. "You're new," he said, tone even. "I am. You speak like someone who's been here longer. I don't think volume equals value." He looked at her for a second longer than necessary, then nodded once and walked off. She didn't expect to see him again. Men like him lived in meetings behind glass walls or in corner offices that smelled like leather and secrets. But over the next few weeks, he started passing by her desk more often. At first, he asked for printed reports, then brief confirmations about schedules, then nothing at all, just walked by, sometimes with coffee in hand, sometimes with his phone pressed to his ear, pausing only long enough to give her a glance that felt intentional. She never flirted, never changed how she dressed, never tried to stand out, but something about her silence, her steadiness, seemed to pull him in. One Thursday evening, the office emptied early. Rain tapped the glass, and the city outside felt softer, quieter. She packed her bag, ready to walk home when his voice returned. "Leora, He'd never used her name before. She turned, surprised. "Yes? You walk home?" She hesitated. "I do. Do you feel safe doing that?" She blinked. "Yes. I'd like to walk with you anyway." She could have said no, but something in his tone, low, grounded, not commanding, made her nod. They walked 3 blocks without speaking. Then he asked, "You don't come from this world, do you?" "I come from kitchens that stay hot until midnight." "You?" He smiled faintly. "I come from boardrooms where everyone lies with polish." She didn't laugh. She didn't ask questions. She let the silence stretch. He liked that. He walked her all the way to her building. He didn't ask to come in. He didn't linger. He only said, "I meant it. You're the calmest part of my day." Then he left. That was how it began. Not with champagne, not with roses, but with silence that didn't feel empty. Over time, he started visiting her during quiet hours, asked about her weekends, shared pieces of his thoughts slowly, like someone testing a bridge before crossing it. He told her he didn't trust easily, that his world was full of eyes, that most people loved his name, not him. She told him she wasn't impressed by names. He smiled again. One Friday evening, he invited her to dinner, not a gala, not a restaurant full of cameras, a quiet bistro tucked into a side street near the river. She wore her simplest dress. He showed up without a driver. They sat in a booth near the back. They talked. He didn't ask about her past. She didn't ask about his power. He told her he liked how she didn't perform for him. She told him she liked how he listened without interrupting. By the time they left, she wasn't sure what to call what they had, but she knew it mattered. That night, as they stood by her building, he touched her hand and said, "You bring me peace." She didn't say it back, but she felt it too. After that night at the riverfront bistro, something changed. They didn't speak about titles. They didn't define anything. But Arian's presence became a quiet rhythm in her life. Every few days he showed up, sometimes late, sometimes early, but always with intention. They never met in crowded places. He respected her desire for privacy, for quiet. Sometimes they shared takeout containers in her apartment while soft jazz played in the background. Other times, they sat in his car for an hour, engine off, just talking. She liked how he never pressured her, never showed up with flowers that looked like apologies or with statements that sounded like declarations. He kept things simple, steady. She appreciated that. On Sundays, she cooked, not for him, not because she was trying to impress him, but because it was the only day she slowed down. He started coming over in the evenings, long after the dishes were done, when her small apartment smelled like garlic and rosemary. He'd sit on her couch, loosen his tie, and say nothing for minutes. Sometimes, he would look at her across the room, like he didn't want to break the quiet. Sometimes, she sat beside him and leaned her head on his shoulder, and that was enough. One night, he fell asleep on her sofa. His phone kept vibrating. She silenced it. He woke up briefly and whispered, "You feel like the part of life I forgot I needed." She didn't reply. She watched him sleep, his jaw slack, his body at ease in a way she imagined few had ever seen. She didn't know how long it would last, and she didn't dare name it love. But she knew it was real. One evening, he took her to a small jazz lounge in Midtown. Low lights, velvety, seats, a saxophonist who played like the world was ending outside. He placed her coat over her shoulders when she got cold. She leaned into him during one slow song. He kissed her forehead that night, nothing more. It was the kind of kiss that asked for nothing but meant everything. That was when she let herself fall. Not loudly, not all at once, just enough to smile when he wasn't looking. Just enough to cook a little more when she knew he was coming. Just enough to feel it when he was quiet for too long. One Thursday, they sat on her floor, eating out of a single pasta bowl because all her plates were in the sink. He was still in his office shirt, sleeves rolled up. She had on fuzzy socks and her oldest t-shirt. "I want to show you something," he said, reaching into his bag. He pulled out a photo of his younger self and his father, both dressed in tailored suits, standing stiff at some charity event. "I hated that night," he said, placing the photo down. Why? Because I smiled for the cameras, and he whispered, "Fix your collar. You're embarrassing the family." She blinked. That's what being a Valtor meant, he said. Precision, appearances, no flaws. She didn't reach for his hand. She didn't offer comfort. She just said, "I hope you're healing from that." He looked at her and smiled like it was the first time someone ever responded that way. A week later, things shifted. He arrived late to her apartment, 10 p.m. His face was tense, his words slower than usual. She didn't ask at first. She poured tea. He drank half of it without speaking. Then he said, "My mother's hosting a family dinner this Saturday." Leora paused. He continued, "She asked me to bring someone." She looked at him closely. "Do they know about me?" He hesitated. "They know I've been seeing someone. Not much else." Leora felt her chest tighten. Not with fear, with clarity. "You want me to go?" she asked quietly. "I do," he said. "I want you there." "Why?" "Because I need them to see that I'm not going to follow their blueprint. I need them to know who I choose." She looked down. "I don't want to walk into a room to prove I belong there, Arian." "You don't have to prove anything," he said. "You already do, every day. Then why do I feel like I'd be a test in that room?" He exhaled. "They don't know you. But they will. I'll make sure of it." She looked him in the eye. "Will you stand beside me the whole time?" Every second. Silence hung between them. She nodded slowly. "Okay." Leora stood in front of her mirror for longer than usual. She didn't wear designer. She didn't own diamonds. But she had a soft green dress that fit her quietly, a pair of nude flats that didn't scream wealth, and a silver bracelet her mother gave her when she turned 25. She tied her hair back. Simple, neat. She wasn't trying to blend in. She was trying to stay herself. Ariane arrived in a black SUV. He wore a navy suit. He looked calm, but not at peace. They didn't talk much during the drive. He touched her hand once. She squeezed it gently. When the car pulled up to the Valtor estate gates, Leora looked at the mansion. 3 stories, of glass and stone, with lights that made the driveway glow like it was part of a movie set. She breathed in once. Quiet. Deep. The door opened. The staff led them into the main hall. And right away, she felt it. Eyes. Judgment. His mother stood at the end of the hall, elegant and unreadable. Her dress shimmered. Her lips held a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. Beside her, Arian's sister, tall, styled and smirking, whispered something to a cousin. A soft laugh followed. Arian reached for Leora's hand. She took it. They entered the dining room. 14 seats, crystal glasses, candles, white linens, a table meant for royalty, not visitors. Leora kept her posture steady. His mother asked, "Where did you grow up?" Leora replied, "In a town where neighbors borrow sugar and don't return it." A few stiff chuckles. His sister leaned forward. "What degree did you say you had again?" "I didn't." Another pause. Arian tried to redirect, but the questions kept coming. "What do your parents do? Are you used to dinners like these? How do you handle pressure?" Their tones stayed civil, but their eyes said everything. They weren't curious. They were checking boxes, looking for cracks. Leora answered calmly, never lowering her gaze, but she felt the weight growing. And then his father put down his wine glass. "You are keeping the wrong company, son." The room froze. Arian sat straighter. "Excuse me?" His mother cut in. "This is a mistake, Arian. She doesn't belong here." Leora blinked once. She didn't tremble. She didn't shrink. But she felt the sting crawl down her throat. Then his sister added, "Send her home. She doesn't fit this table." Arian's jaw tensed. Leora looked at him, and that was the moment. He looked at his mother, at his sister, then at Leora. The air felt thin, and softly he said, "Leora." She waited. He dropped his gaze. "Please leave." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't insult her, but the words hit harder than if he had screamed. She didn't speak. She stood. She smoothed her dress and walked out of the Valtor mansion without looking back. Leora didn't cry in the car. She didn't look back at the estate or glance at her reflection in the window. Her hands stayed clenched around the strap of her purse, knuckles pale but steady. The driver didn't ask questions. When she stepped into her apartment, it was silent, dimly lit. The soft hum of her fridge the only sound. She didn't change clothes right away. She walked to the kitchen, placed her purse on the counter, and sat down at her small table. She stared at the candle she'd forgotten to light before leaving. The words replayed in her head, each syllable clear. Please, leave. He hadn't shouted. He hadn't defended her either. That hurt worse. Not the humiliation, not the questions, not the way his mother dismissed her like a misplaced coat in the wrong room. It was the quiet betrayal, the absence of his voice when hers needed shelter. Leora sat in silence for almost an hour. Then she stood, untied her hair, took off her dress, folded it, and placed it in the back of her closet. Not as a memory, not as a trophy, but as a mark, a reminder. The next morning, she made tea like she always did. 1 scoop of chamomile, no sugar. She opened the window. The city moved around her, cars honking, voices rising from the street, the sound of a neighbor's radio playing an old R&B track. She let it all in. She washed the dishes from the night before, swept the floor, and then sat down with her journal. She didn't write about him. She wrote about herself, about how she still had her mornings, still had her clarity, still had her name. Then she closed the book and went on with her day. Over the next 2 weeks, she disappeared. From him, from the version of herself that waited, from the idea that love, even soft love, should be endured at the cost of dignity. She blocked his number, not with anger, but with intention. She didn't need apologies dressed as invitations. She needed room to think again. She stopped passing by the Valter building on her walks home. She took longer routes. She discovered a bakery tucked behind a flower shop. The owner gave her a free muffin the second day. "You look like someone who gives more than she takes," the woman said. Leora smiled. "I'm learning balance." She quit her job 2 weeks later, not because she was running, but because she was clearing space. She had savings. She'd been careful for years. She applied for an online course in financial analysis, something she'd always wanted to do, but never had the nerve or time. She bought second-hand textbooks, downloaded lectures, woke up early to study, worked late nights at a nearby bookstore to keep her rhythm. The manager, a woman named Rena with red hair and sharp instincts, hired her without much fuss. "You're the quiet kind," Rena said. "You don't make noise, but you don't miss a thing." Leora smiled. "Noise doesn't build futures." "No," Rena agreed. "But silence makes you impossible to forget." Her apartment felt different now. Not emptier, clearer. She lit candles in the evening, not for romance, not for anyone to see, but because she liked how the light flickered across the pages of her books. She bought a small dining table with her first bookstore paycheck. It wasn't expensive, but it was wide enough to sit at comfortably, to eat slowly, to feel like home wasn't just a space she passed through. She cooked again, not because someone would join her, but because she wanted flavors that felt like peace. She stopped checking her phone for missed calls. She started checking it for daily affirmations. And one night, while brushing her hair, she whispered to herself, "You're not broken. You were placed in the wrong room." Meanwhile, Arian was unraveling. The first week after the dinner, he tried to bury himself in work. Meetings, emails, endless updates, but everything felt fogged. He sat in his office staring at the corner where she used to sit at reception. He told himself she'd call. She didn't. He told himself he'd wait. But the silence stretched. He drafted a message once, deleted it, called her. She didn't answer. He didn't try again. He knew what he did. Knew that the worst thing wasn't that he let his family insult her. It was that he didn't get up, didn't follow her, didn't speak. His mother believed he'd moved on. His sister joked that he dodged a scandal, but Arian didn't laugh. He carried her silence like a stone in his chest. A stone that didn't budge. no matter how much he smiled in public or how much power his signature still held in the city. Some nights he sat alone on his balcony, glass in hand, phone dark, and wondered what it cost to be accepted by everyone but seen by no one. Leora's course moved fast. 3 months. She passed every quiz, submitted every assignment before the deadline. Her instructor messaged her once and said, "You ask smart questions." "Most people don't." She responded, "I ask to understand, not to prove I know something." You'll do well in rooms where clarity matters more than noise. I hope so. You already do. By the 4th month, she applied for jobs, real ones where her name would stand next to graphs and financial reports, not coffee orders and printed agendas. She interviewed at a rising firm downtown, small, young, focused on equity and innovation. The woman who interviewed her, a manager named Celeste, asked, "Why do you want to work here?" Leora answered, "Because I've spent enough time being underestimated. Now I want to be useful." Celeste smiled. "You're hired." The day she received her badge, Leora stood by the office window and looked out over the city. Same skyline, same streets. But this time, she felt above it all. Not in pride, in perspective. She was still quiet, still modest, still soft in a world that rewarded sharpness. But she was steady now, and she didn't flinch when she walked into rooms with people who wore more expensive shoes or carried louder names. She remembered who she was, before love, before pain, before any of it. She was never looking to be chosen. She was learning to choose herself. Leora adjusted to her new role with the same quiet precision she carried through every stage of her life. She didn't rush to prove herself. She watched, listened, learned systems. Then, when the time was right, she spoke up with calm confidence that turned heads, not because it was loud, but because it was rare. In her 3rd week, she noticed a line of error in a financial projection. It was small, buried deep in one of the firm's partnership estimates. She corrected it without asking for praise. Her manager noticed. "You don't hesitate," Celeste said during a one-on-one meeting. "I don't second-guess what I know is accurate," Leora replied. Celeste leaned back in her chair. "You're going to lead one of our client meetings next quarter." Leora didn't blink. "I'll be ready." And she was. Her days became rhythm again. Mornings started with quiet stretches and slow tea. She walked to work instead of taking the train, chose to feel her steps on the ground, to see the changing trees, to breathe before the noise of the day settled in. Evenings were for her. Sometimes she cooked. Sometimes she lit her candles and read. Sometimes she sat by her window and let the quiet hold her. Her world wasn't loud, but it was hers. And for the first time, she didn't miss what she'd lost. Not because it didn't matter, but because she mattered more. One evening in late spring, she sat at her kitchen table, surrounded by papers and charts. She was leading a project proposal in 2 weeks. It was the kind of job she'd dreamed about when she worked behind a reception desk with no voice in the room. The assignment was tied to a major development deal: city housing, green infrastructure, community-based planning. Her firm was preparing to manage the financial structure and analysis. As she organized her notes, Celeste called. "We have confirmation," she said. "The construction partner will be Valtor Holdings." Leora paused, then nodded slowly. "All right. You still comfortable leading this?" "Yes," Leora said, her voice level. "Completely." She hung up. She didn't flinch, didn't feel her chest tighten, didn't even blink. She simply turned her page and kept working. The night before the presentation, she laid out her outfit carefully. Not to impress, to represent. She wore a clean-cut navy blue blouse, beige slacks, small gold studs in her ears, and flat shoes that didn't click against floors. She pressed her papers, checked her slides, rehearsed her key points once before bed, then slept deeply. No dreams of him, no fear of seeing him. Just rest. She woke early, brewed her tea, and walked to work without thinking about the weight the day might carry. When she arrived, her team gathered in the glass conference room. Her laptop was ready. Her confidence was real. 10 minutes before the meeting began, she heard the elevator open. She didn't look up at first, but then she heard the room shift, the quiet shuffle of nerves, the tightening of posture that always followed power. She looked. Arian Valtor stood in the doorway. Same suit style, same quiet intensity, same presence that once made her heart ache. But he looked tired. His eyes searched the room until they landed on her. And when they did, he froze. Because she wasn't who she used to be. She wasn't behind a desk or waiting in silence for approval. She stood at the head of the table, calm, composed, focused, her hair pulled back, her shoulders squared, her energy untouchable. Leora met his eyes for less than a second, then looked back at her notes. The presentation began. She moved through slides with clarity, answered questions with ease, spoke directly to executives without apology or nerves. Arian didn't say much. He sat near the end of the table, watching, trying to catch a glimpse of the softness she used to wear for him. But all he saw was a woman who no longer needed his gaze to know she mattered. When the meeting ended, people clapped softly. One executive leaned over to Celeste and whispered, "She's a gem." Leora packed her laptop. As she left the room, Arian stood outside the glass door. He looked at her like he had 1,000 things to say. She nodded politely as she passed him. No words, no hesitation, and she didn't stop. That night, she walked home with her shoes in her hand and her bag slung over her shoulder. The pavement under her feet felt familiar, grounded, solid. She passed the bakery, the flower shop, the bookstore that had helped her pay rent months ago. Each corner reminded her, she built this life, from the silence they gave her, from the space he created when he stepped aside instead of standing beside her. And now, she didn't owe anyone her voice. Her presence was enough. She passed the man who once told her to leave, and he didn't recognize who she'd become. Have you ever grown so much that the people who once doubted you wouldn't know where to place you now? Leora didn't chase closure. She built peace. And now, the man who broke her couldn't even break her focus. If someone failed to stand for you once, would you ever let them stand beside you again? Stick around, subscribe, and keep watching Mr. Charles Stories. Because what happens next will make you believe in the power of not going back. Arian Valtor had mastered silence long before Leora came into his life. He knew how to look calm in meetings while chaos boiled underneath. He knew how to walk into family dinners and pretend the weight of expectation didn't press into his spine. He knew how to show strength without revealing the fractures beneath it. But after she left that night, after he said, "Please leave," something shifted, and no amount of silence could cover it. He didn't sleep much the first week. Not because of guilt alone, but because of her expression as she stood. She hadn't argued. She hadn't pleaded. She hadn't asked him why. She'd simply looked at him like she didn't recognize him. And then she walked out like she wasn't walking away from a man, but from a mistake she refused to repeat. His mother said nothing afterward. No congratulations, no disapproval, no reflection. She believed the evening had gone exactly as planned. "We protected the family," she said to Arian the next morning over coffee. He didn't reply. His sister was even more blunt. "She didn't belong here," she said. "Let's not pretend otherwise." Arian said nothing then either. But later that day, he sat in his office for 2 hours without answering a single email. Her silence was louder than their approval. Over the next few weeks, he tried to move forward. He focused on work, threw himself into project meetings, signed off on new developments, attended board calls and reviewed international acquisitions. But everything felt mechanical. Conversations passed through him. Smiles felt like lies. He still had the corner office, the control, the admiration, but none of it felt real anymore, because the only person who ever looked at him without wanting something was gone, and she wasn't coming back. The first time he tried to call her, he was sitting on his balcony. The sky was soft, dusky, painted in quiet grays. He didn't plan to call. He just opened his phone, scrolled, found her number. He hesitated before pressing dial. It rang twice, then stopped. No voicemail, No response. He waited. He never tried again. He knew what her silence meant. She wasn't ignoring him. She had moved on. He began noticing gaps at work. A growing delay in internal communications. A shift in investor meetings. Reports weren't as thorough. One of the board advisors pulled him aside. "Your mother's PR division is mishandling public outreach," he said. "There's tension growing in city planning circles. Some of the media leaks, they're not accidental." Arian raised his brows. "You're saying someone's sabotaging the trust we've built? Not intentionally, but the missteps are coming from inside your own team. Your sister's trying to clean it up, but—" Arian sighed. "I'll look into it." But he didn't, not yet. Because every time he tried to refocus, his thoughts returned to her. Not just Leora's absence, but the peace she used to carry into every room she entered, and how he let it slip through his fingers for the sake of a dinner that didn't feed him anything but shame. His mother scheduled another family meeting. Not business, personal. He arrived late. She was already seated at the table, wineglass in hand, voice calm. "You seem scattered lately," she said. "I'm managing," he replied, sitting opposite her. "Managing isn't thriving. You know that." He looked at her. "What is it you want to say?" She smiled thinly. "I've arranged for you to meet someone. Her family is relocating to Atlanta from New York. Her father has connections with several biotech firms we're pursuing." Arian didn't blink. "No. It's just dinner." "No." His mother's tone sharpened. "You can't keep mourning a receptionist." He stared at her for a full 5 seconds. "She wasn't a receptionist. She was the only honest thing in my life." The room froze. His mother's hand paused on her glass. He stood. "I don't need you choosing my future while destroying the integrity of our company." Her expression darkened. "Watch your tone." "No, you watch yours. You watched me humiliate the only woman who gave me peace. And you didn't stop it. You led it." She stood, too. She didn't belong. She belonged more than anyone else at that table. Neither of them spoke for a long moment. Then he walked out. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't look back. 2 weeks later, he walked into a board review. One of the consultants from the city was there, new blood, young, highly regarded. She led her team with poise, dissected the firm's recent fiscal strategies, and pointed out the areas that needed restructuring, particularly in the PR division managed by his mother and sister. Arian sat at the head of the table, silent. He didn't interrupt. He didn't defend. He just listened, because everything she said was true. After the meeting, one of the younger executives approached him privately. "Who was that analyst?" he asked. "She speaks like someone who doesn't care who's in the room. That kind of focus, it's rare." Arian replied quietly, "Yes, it is." He didn't mention Leora's name, but in that moment, he wished she had been there. Because if she had said those words, she wouldn't have needed to raise her voice. She would have let her clarity speak louder than any position. And maybe, just maybe, his mother would have finally understood who they'd lost. That night, Arian opened the drawer in his bedroom. At the very back, folded between old letters and documents, was a photo of her. She was laughing in it. One Sunday evening, after cooking too much pasta, she'd sat cross-legged on his couch holding a small plate like it was gold. He snapped the photo without warning. She hadn't wanted him to keep it, but he had. He held it now, not to romanticize what they had, but to remind himself what it felt like to sit in peace with someone who didn't ask him to perform, someone who didn't care what his last name meant, someone who loved him when no one was watching. He placed the photo on the nightstand, and for the first time in months, he closed his eyes and let regret stay exactly where it belonged. It had taken less than 90 minutes to unravel everything Arian and Leora had spent 6 months building. She hadn't wanted to go that night. She remembered that clearly now. There had been something in his tone, eager but unsure. He kept saying he needed her there, that he wanted his family to see who she was. She believed him. She trusted that if he asked her to walk into fire, he'd at least hold her hand. But when she stepped into the Valter estate that evening, everything she feared sat around that table in polished suits and practiced smiles. From the moment she walked through the doors, she felt their eyes. Not the kind that greeted, the kind that scanned, measured, weighed. His mother stood at the top of the stairs, her expression unreadable. Her dress shimmered under the chandelier, her face trained into that kind of still grace only money teaches. Arian's grip on her hand tightened, but she said nothing. Inside, the dining room smelled of citrus polish and old money. The table could seat 20. 14 places were set. Crystal glasses, white napkins folded like crowns. No warmth, no welcome, just elegance soaked in expectation. Leora sat beside Arian. Across from his sister, to her left, his aunt, to her right, his cousin, a man who never once looked her in the eyes. The silence before the first course was louder than traffic. His mother finally broke it. "So, Leora," she said, "Arian tells us you're from a small town." "Yes," Leora replied calmly. "Just outside Macon." His mother nodded slowly. "Do you go back often?" "Not lately. Your family still there?" "My mother is. She runs a cafe." His sister leaned in. "A cafe? What kind?" "Coffee, pastries, Southern-style breakfast." "How charming," she said, tone light but eyes sharp. Arian's jaw flexed. His aunt smiled faintly. "And what did you study in school?" "Business admin. Community college. Not a university?" the cousin asked, without looking up from his bread. "No. I worked full-time while studying. It was the most efficient path." "A practical girl," his aunt noted, cutting her fish. "We like that." His sister's laugh was quiet, contained, practiced. Arian reached for his water. Leora stayed still. The questions didn't stop. "Do you plan to go back to school? Is this your first serious relationship? Are you comfortable in rooms like these?" At first, she answered them all. Clear, composed, never apologetic. But she started to feel the tone shift. Every compliment was laced with something pointed. Every question led back to what she wasn't. She wasn't legacy. She wasn't wealthy. She wasn't chosen by their circle. And, most of all, she wasn't what they had planned for Arian. Halfway through the second course, his father finally spoke. He had said nothing until then, just observed with a glass of bourbon and the kind of expression that didn't need sharpening to cut. "You're loyal to your people, son," he said slowly, placing his glass down. "But you're keeping the wrong company." Arian straightened. "She's not company. She's important to me." His father looked at Leora, then back at Arian. "Feelings don't build futures. Bloodlines do." His mother cut in, gently. "This isn't personal. She's not offensive. She's simple. She's grounded," Arian replied. "Grounded doesn't help when you're walking through fire." His sister looked between them all. "Let's not argue. This was predictable. She doesn't belong here, that's all." The words dropped like a stone in a still lake. The room froze. Leora looked at Arian, not pleading, just waiting for him to stand, to speak, to do something. He looked at his sister, then his mother, then down at his plate. "Leora." She blinked once, and then he said it. "Please leave." 3 words. No anger, no explanation, just surrender. Leora stood. Her napkin dropped to her chair. She pushed it in gently, like she was leaving a restaurant, not her dignity. She didn't speak, didn't look back. She walked out of the Valtor mansion without a sound. Her silence echoed through every hallway, every room, and through every corner of Arian's chest. For months, he didn't follow her. He didn't call that night. He let her disappear like a chapter he wasn't strong enough to finish reading. He sat in that room while his mother complimented the floral arrangement, and his sister opened a new bottle of wine like nothing had happened. But something had, and he knew it the second she left. That room hadn't just lost her presence. It lost his peace, and he didn't get it back. Not the next day, not the next week, not for a long, long time. Leora didn't pack right away. For a few days after that dinner, she simply lived, or tried to. She went to work. She answered phones. She smiled when necessary. and said good morning when expected. But inside, she was somewhere else, floating, distant, unseen. The moment haunted her, not because of what they said, but because of what he didn't. She wasn't looking for a defense. She was hoping for presence. But when it mattered, he wasn't there. And that changed everything. So 3 days later, she came home, stood in the middle of her apartment, and looked around. Everything felt too small. Not because it was tiny, but because it no longer matched the woman she was becoming. She opened her closet, pulled out a duffel bag, and started folding her life into something new. She didn't move into a fancier place. She found a small one-bedroom unit closer to downtown. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't expensive, but it had clean walls, better light, and windows that faced the sunrise instead of a brick wall. She didn't tell anyone she moved, not her co-workers, not her old neighbors, no one. Because this part of her journey wasn't for display, it was for her. On her first morning in the new apartment, she didn't unpack everything. She made tea. She sat on the floor with a notepad and wrote 2 words at the top, next steps. She didn't write about Arian, didn't write about hurt. She wrote about what came next. She wanted more than front desk roles, more than temporary jobs. She had an interest in finance. Numbers made sense to her. Budgets, patterns, clarity. She'd always been the one to help her mother track income at the cafe. She liked structure. She searched online for evening courses, found a 3-month certification in financial analysis. Flexible, practical, professional. It would cost most of her savings, but she didn't hesitate. She enrolled that same day. To support herself, she picked up part-time work. A local bookstore hired her for evenings and weekends. It was warm, quiet, and smelled like aged paper and cinnamon. The owner, Rena, was direct but fair. "You don't talk much," she said during the interview. "I say what's needed," Leora replied. Rena nodded. "You'll do." And she did. She learned how to stock shelves in alphabetical order, how to reset displays without disturbing the layout, how to recommend books based on instinct, not buzzwords. Some nights, after closing, she'd stay behind for an extra hour, reading finance textbooks behind the register, highlighting phrases with a borrowed pen, building, always building. Her days took on rhythm. Wake at 6, study until 9, nap, lunch, class, work, the evening shift, study again at night. No distractions, no scrolling, no comparisons. She wasn't proving anything. She was preparing. And something subtle began to shift in her. Her shoulders sat straighter, her eyes more focused, her words more precise. She didn't need to fill silence anymore. She wore it like armor. Sometimes memories returned. The night Arian kissed her forehead, the warmth of his hand on her lower back when they walked beside traffic, the soft way he used to say her name. But she never let those thoughts stay, because missing someone wasn't the same as needing them. And she no longer needed to be chosen to feel valuable. She chose herself now, daily. By the end of the first month, she took her first practice exam, scored 92. Her instructor left a note on the online portal. Strong grasp, natural instincts. "You're built for this." She sat back in her chair, the screen glowing, her breath slow and even. For the first time in weeks, she smiled without effort. She ordered a small cake slice from a nearby cafe to celebrate. 1 candle. No occasion. No one to blow it with. Just her. And it was enough. On her nights off, she walked. Long streets, crowded sidewalks, familiar crosswalks. She passed restaurants filled with noise and laughter. But she didn't feel alone. Solitude no longer felt like a punishment. It felt like peace. She found a favorite bench on 6th Street. Sat there, often with hot tea in a paper cup, watching the city forget itself. She didn't wait for calls. Didn't check for messages. Arian faded into the background of her thoughts. Not erased, but no longer central. And with every step she took away from that chapter, she felt lighter. Not because the pain was gone, but because it no longer owned her. By the end of her second month at the bookstore and in her course, Leora stopped doubting her new direction. She no longer needed reminders on her phone to study. She no longer paused before speaking in group forums. Her analysis reports became case studies for others to review. Her thoughts weren't just accurate, they were trusted. Her voice, once used only when necessary, was now something others leaned in to hear. And she didn't rush it. She stayed consistent. She submitted assignments early, asked strategic questions, stayed late at work, finished her course by the end of the third month with one of the highest scores in her cohort. No fanfare, just facts. She printed the certificate quietly, bought a slim black frame, hung it beside her bookshelf near her kitchen. She didn't show it off. She didn't send a photo to anyone. She looked at it in the mornings while sipping tea and thought, "You did this," with no one clapping, no one helping, no one saving. Just you. Her boss at the bookstore noticed a change too. "You carry yourself differently now," Rena said one night after closing. "Different how?" "Like someone who doesn't shrink when they walk into a room." Leora gave a small smile. "I guess I stopped believing I had to." Rena chuckled. "Well, you better be ready to leave this place soon. Women like you don't stay behind registers long." She was right. A week later, Leora received an email from a woman named Celeste, a manager at a rising investment consultancy firm in Midtown. Celeste had found Leora's name through the course network and reviewed her scores and submitted case reviews. "We're a small team but a fast-growing one," the email read. "We value precision, clarity, and independence. I'd love to meet you." Leora stared at the message for 10 seconds before replying, "Yes, I'd like to come in." Her interview was scheduled for a Monday morning. She wore black slacks, a deep green blouse, and simple flats. Her hair pulled back. No makeup. A clear mind. The waiting room had floor-to-ceiling windows and coffee that didn't taste like regret. Celeste welcomed her personally. Blonde, late 30s, sharp tone, but curious eyes. The interview wasn't long. But it was specific. What would you do if you noticed a recurring pattern of financial error across 3 divisions? Track the pattern. Isolate the root. Then report it with solutions, not just observations. What would you do if you were in a room with executives who don't respect your experience? I'd make sure they respected my accuracy. Celeste leaned back, smiled faintly. "I like the way you speak. I only speak when I have something useful to say." "Well, you'll fit in here." The job offer came that evening. Competitive salary, benefits, opportunity to lead client-facing work within 6 months. Leora accepted before the email fully finished loading. She wrote her resignation letter to Rena by hand. When she handed it over, Rena didn't flinch. "I knew it was coming," she said. "You built me a quiet place to land," Leora told her. "I won't forget that." Rena waved it off. "Just promise me one thing." "What's that?" "Never explain your worth in a room that couldn't see it the first time." Leora nodded once. The new office was clean, structured, respectful. No gossip, no noise. Just people who worked hard and recognized skill when they saw it. Celeste introduced her as an analyst with a precision we've been missing. Her desk overlooked the city skyline. Her laptop was new. Her email inbox filled quickly, but not with chaos. With purpose. She learned the firm's systems fast. Colleagues started turning to her within 2 weeks. "Can you run this by Friday? Mind double-checking this estimate? Your last projection saved us 2 meetings." Leora didn't beam, didn't preen. She answered with short nods and sharp results. It was enough. She no longer needed noise to feel seen. Her clarity did the talking. 3 months into the role, Celeste knocked on her office door. "You free for 5 minutes?" Leora closed her laptop. "Yes." Celeste walked in, holding a thin folder. "We're partnering with a real estate developer for a major housing project near Grant Park. Multi-phase, multi-million-dollar infrastructure, city-backed. Our job is to build a bulletproof financial plan to prevent the risk of collapse." Leora nodded. "Understood." Celeste placed the folder down. I want you to lead the numbers. Build the architecture from the inside out. You'll guide the presentation. You'll own the strategy. Leora blinked. Are you sure? I don't promote based on tenure, Celeste said. I promote based on trust. And I trust your mind. Leora looked down at the folder. The logo on the front was familiar. Valtor Holdings. Her stomach didn't twist. Her pulse didn't spike. She sat straighter. All right, she said. I'll begin tonight. That evening, she walked home as the city lights came on one by one. She passed the old bookstore, the flower shop, the corner where she once sat with nothing but a tea and a journal full of doubts. Now, she had a role, a plan, a seat at the table, and this time, no one could pull the chair out from under her. The boardroom on the 29th floor of the Stanton building had floor-to-ceiling glass and a silence that made people listen harder. 10 chairs circled the oval-shaped table. A massive screen hung on the far wall. 2 glass pitchers, one with lemon slices, the other with cucumber, stood untouched in the center. Leora entered at 9:05 a.m. Sharp. She wasn't nervous. She had spent the weekend reviewing her data models, refining her presentation, and walking herself through every possible question the Valtor team might throw her way. She wore charcoal grey trousers, a sleeveless black top, and a thin silver necklace. Her hair was pulled back, sleek and simple. No curls, no soft framing, just clarity. Celeste followed her in. Lead this, she whispered. You own the room. Leora nodded and set up her laptop. The doors opened at 9:13 a.m. A group from Valtor Holdings entered. Legal, logistics, a junior partner. Arian wasn't among them. Leora didn't expect him to be. At least, not immediately. She moved through the first portion of the presentation with her usual ease. Our objective, she said, pointing to the screen, is to ensure zero margin. For missed allocations in the first 120 days, delays in material delivery or shifts in property valuations can destabilize municipal confidence, especially with city visibility on this scale. Her voice was clear, firm. She didn't race through her words. She didn't shrink between slides. She knew this material because she built it from the ground up. Her audience nodded, took notes, asked sharp questions. She answered each one directly, no hesitation, no filler. And that was when the doors opened again. She saw the reaction before she saw him. Heads turned, postures stiffened. Celeste glanced briefly toward the door. Then Leora did too. Arian Valtor walked into the room. Dark navy suit, crisp white shirt, no tie, cufflinks like he always wore, clean silver, engraved subtly. He paused mid-step, because she was standing at the front, clicker in one hand, laser pointer in the other, her body aligned with the screen, her face calm. She didn't flinch when their eyes met. She didn't look away. He did, only for a second, but it was enough. He moved to an open seat near the far end, didn't interrupt, didn't speak. Leora turned back to the screen. She clicked to the next slide and continued without missing a beat. If Valtor Holdings projected bid aligns with these recommendations, we can guarantee full funding by fourth quarter. We've already stress-tested against 3 inflation scenarios. Someone from legal asked, and if construction timelines slip? Leora replied, we already accounted for material price shifts and labor gaps. The model flexes with 2-week buffer periods and a holdover fund. She felt Arian watching her, not with ownership, but with something he couldn't cover up. Recognition, realization, and possibly regret. But Leora didn't care. This wasn't about closure. This wasn't about being seen. She was here to do her job, and she was good at it. The meeting lasted just over an hour. When it ended, people lingered in conversation. There were polite nods, exchanged cards, and quiet compliments. You have a way of making complex numbers feel simple, someone from the finance side told her. Celeste smiled. She's one of the best minds I've worked with. Leora packed her laptop. She didn't glance at Arian again. Not even when he stood near the door, as if waiting. Not even when he took one step in her direction. She walked right past him, nodded professionally, and left, not in anger, not to make a point, simply because she had nothing left to say. Outside, the sun was sharp but not harsh. She walked 2 blocks to a cafe, ordered a cold tea, and sat down at a corner table by the window. She didn't replay the meeting. She didn't dissect his reaction. She opened her laptop and started reviewing follow-up notes, because she still had work to do, and he was no longer part of the plan. Arian stayed in his seat long after the others left. The sound of doors clicking shut, of chairs sliding back, of voices fading down the hallway. He didn't hear any of it clearly. Only the silence that followed when she walked past him without pause. She didn't flinch. She didn't rush. She didn't even acknowledge him beyond a brief, measured nod. And that hurt more than anger, because it was clear she no longer looked at him with hope, no longer looked at him like she was waiting for something. She had moved on, and she had done it so thoroughly that she could stand at the head of a room filled with executives, including him, and speak like he was no one. No heat, no hurt, just distance, professional, controlled, strong, unreachable. He walked out of the room slowly. He didn't expect her to wait, but part of him hoped she would. He scanned the hallway. Gone. Elevator indicator still glowing. Already on the lobby floor. He rode down, alone. When the doors opened, he saw her through the glass, across the marble atrium, already outside. The soft sway of her dark slacks, her bag pulled over one shoulder, her steps even. She didn't stop. He followed. Not quickly. He wasn't chasing her. But he needed something, anything, that gave him a thread back to the woman he let down. He caught up with her just as she turned the corner near the cafe. "Leora," he said. She stopped, turned, looked at him, not cold, not unkind, just unreadable. Her arms weren't crossed. Her eyes weren't narrowed. She simply waited. He stepped closer, but not too close. "I didn't know you'd be in the meeting," he said. She nodded once. "Now you do." He hesitated. You did great. You led it well. Thank you." Silence. He shifted. "You look strong," he said. "I am. I've thought about that night," he said carefully. Her expression didn't shift. "I was wrong," he added. She raised her chin slightly. "I know." That reply, quiet and sure, cut through everything else he planned to say. He took a breath. "I didn't defend you. I failed you." She looked at him for a moment, then said, "You didn't just fail me, Arian. You chose comfort. You chose them." He closed his eyes briefly. "And I didn't beg you to stay," she added. His eyes opened again. "No, you didn't." "I left quietly so I could heal," she said. "And I did." Her voice wasn't sharp. It was steady, whole. He stepped closer. "I want to talk, Leora. Just talk. That's all." She looked at him. Her gaze softened just slightly. "I'm not angry," she said. "But I'm not interested in reopening old wounds just because you feel them now." He flinched. "I understand." She adjusted the strap on her shoulder. "If we cross paths again," she said, "I'll be civil, but I'm not yours to interrupt anymore." Then she walked away. And this time, he didn't follow. Because her message was clear. She wasn't bitter. She was simply done. Leora didn't cry. She didn't pause once she turned the corner. She walked into the cafe, placed her order, and sat by the window with her cold tea. She pulled out her laptop and resumed her work. Her heart didn't pound. Her breath didn't shake. Because she wasn't pretending to be okay. She was okay. She didn't need to explain herself anymore. Didn't need to revisit what had already taught her everything. He had his chance. He made his choice. And now, she made hers. Across the street, Arian stood frozen on the sidewalk. He watched her through the glass, focused, poised, untouched, and it hit him like nothing else had since the night she walked away. He had loved her. He might still. But she no longer lived in the space where he could reach her, not because she was hiding, but because she had grown past the version of her that needed him. And now, she didn't need to leave again. Because she'd already moved on the first time, and she never looked back. Arian sat in his office with the blinds drawn and his sleeves rolled up. It was after 10 p.m. The building had emptied. The elevators had stopped ringing. The hum of the city below faded behind thick glass and thicker regret. The lights from his screen cast a soft blue glow across the room, highlighting the untouched reports scattered across his desk. He hadn't answered a single email in over 2 hours. His phone buzzed. A message from his sister. "Did you review the Foundation's quarterly numbers? PR team's waiting." He turned the screen over, letting it face down with a dull thud. He wasn't in the mood to talk about the Foundation, not about press narratives, not about reputation management or image control. He couldn't stop thinking about Leora's voice in that meeting. Measured, firm, professional, no bitterness, no edge, and no invitation. She didn't look like someone holding a grudge. She looked like someone who no longer needed an apology, and that haunted him more than any outburst ever could have. His mother had noticed his shift. She brought it up at a quiet brunch the following Sunday. "You've been distant lately," she said, sipping tea, legs crossed in her favorite lounge chair near the garden. "I've been busy. You're not yourself." Arian looked up from his plate. "What does that mean?" "You're sharp," she said, "but you're distracted. You're hesitant. You weren't built for hesitation." He stared at her. "Do you think it's ever occurred to you that I was never allowed to become myself?" She blinked, surprised. "I was raised to follow expectations," he said. "To lead, but only with your map. To love, but only within your circle. You're upset over a woman who didn't understand what it takes to survive this world," she said calmly. "No," he said. "I'm upset because I did understand, and I still chose cowardice." Her voice dropped. "That dinner was months ago, and I've felt it every single day since." She didn't respond, because for the first time in years, he wasn't seeking her approval. He was confronting her with the result of following it too far. The next week, the cracks inside Valtor Holdings became harder to ignore. A private city partner pulled out of a pending deal. One of the senior investors flagged inconsistencies in the PR expense accounts. A junior auditor noticed missing signatures on a string of media releases from the family foundation. The source, internal, specifically the PR division, his mother and sister's domain, and the trail of missteps traced back 6 months. He didn't need a whistleblower to know what had happened. They were too confident, too insulated. They handled reputation the way royalty handled scandal, quietly, arrogantly, sloppily. Now the city had noticed, and so had the board. He called an internal meeting with legal, strategy, and external auditors. "You want to go public with this?" his sister asked, visibly irritated. "It's being handled." "It's not handled," Arian replied. "The city liaison asked for transparency. If we bury this, we lose our next 3 contracts, possibly more." His mother interjected. "We can reposition the optics, restructure the language." "You can't reword incompetence," Arian said coldly. A pause followed, then silence. They weren't used to his tone carrying consequences. They weren't used to him leading without looking for permission. He stood. "I want a third-party firm to audit the PR division, top to bottom." His mother narrowed her eyes. "You're letting emotion guide strategy. I'm letting facts speak louder than family pride." That night, he went home and stood on his balcony again. Same view, same skyline, but nothing felt the same. Because peace had once stood in this space with bare feet and soft laughter. She had stood here with tea in her hand and hope in her eyes, and he had let her walk away into a world that was safer without him. Not because she wasn't enough for his world, but because his world was never enough for her. And now, he was left with a reputation that didn't shelter him, and a name that didn't mean much when he said it out loud in empty rooms. He opened the drawer in his bedroom, pulled out the photo again, her smile still quiet, still gentle. He touched the edge of the frame. He had loved her. Maybe he still did. But what mattered more was this. She had loved him when he didn't love himself enough to stand up for her. And that truth would live inside his chest, no matter how much time passed, no matter how many rooms he walked into with control and command. There would always be a part of him that remembered the one moment he could have stood up. And didn't. Leora received the internal email late on a Thursday evening. Subject: urgent referral. External review request from Celeste Body. City-backed partnership with Valtor Holdings now under review. Board requesting third-party financial clarity. They've chosen us. I'm assigning you as the lead analyst. You'll handle the report. Let me know if there are any conflicts. Leora read it twice. No panic, no tremble, just a quiet shift in the air. She closed her laptop, took a breath, and whispered aloud, full circle. But this wasn't about revenge. This was about responsibility. She was being called, not because she once loved a man in that empire, but because her work spoke louder than her history. And now, the very table that once humiliated her would need her clarity to survive. The next morning, she walked into the same high-rise where the Valtors held their quarterly strategy sessions. Only this time, she wasn't a +1. She wasn't a girl in soft green hoping to be seen. She was the lead analyst representing the firm called in to clean up their mess. Her team moved with her. Her badge gave her access. And when she stepped into the 24th floor boardroom, she didn't hesitate. She placed her files on the table, opened her laptop, and waited. One by one, the Valtor board members entered. Then, Arian. He paused when he saw her. She didn't flinch. He sat at the opposite end, said nothing. His mother walked in last. Her sister followed behind, clutching a digital tablet like it could shield her. No one made eye contact. Leora stood. For 2 hours, she asked questions, pulled up inconsistencies, highlighted missed reports, pointed out misaligned expense codes. She dissected their budget reports without emotion. She read audit timelines like weather forecasts. Not once did she raise her voice. Not once did she shift blame. She simply worked, clear, efficient, unshaken. By the end of the session, no one spoke over her, not even his mother. The room sat in stunned silence. Leora gathered her materials. Your external review report will be submitted by Monday, she said. Until then, please forward all missing statements to my team. She paused, then looked directly at Arian's mother. If there are no further questions, silence. She nodded, then walked out. No drama, no performance, only dignity. Later that afternoon, as her team debriefed over coffee, Celeste pulled her aside. You okay? Leora sipped slowly. More than okay. Celeste studied her. You sure you didn't want to say something to them? What would that prove? Celeste smiled faintly. You're a better woman than most. Leora looked out the window. They needed someone steady, she said. Not someone angry. Celeste nodded. They'll never forget the way you handled that. I don't need them to remember me, Leora said quietly. I just need to do my job. That night, Leora stood in her apartment near the window. She watched the city breathe. She thought about all the women who walk out of rooms full of people who never saw them, only to return later with the kind of presence that doesn't ask permission. She didn't feel power. She felt peace. And that was louder. She walked into the same room that once broke her and left without needing to say a single word. Have you ever returned to a place where you were once humiliated, only this time you were the one holding the answers? Leora didn't get even. She got better. And the people who once mocked her now had no choice but to listen. If you were asked to help the very ones who once dismissed you, would you show them your pain or your peace? Don't miss what happens next. Subscribe to Mr. Charles Stories, where dignity always wins louder than drama. The following Monday, Leora returned to the Valtor Holdings tower. Same time, same purpose. But this time, something was different. The building felt smaller. Not because it had changed, because she had. She walked through the glass doors with quiet steps. No rush, No hesitation, no need for affirmation. She greeted the front desk with a polite nod. The woman behind it, young, eager, smiled quickly. "Miss Halen, they're expecting you." Leora thanked her and stepped into the elevator. Floor 24. Executive level. She remembered the last time she stood in this elevator, months ago, back when her dress felt too soft and her heart too open. Now she stood with a thin laptop bag, a calm breath, and a presence that filled more space than words ever could. The boardroom was already occupied when she entered. Celeste joined her. Her team followed, placing documents in front of each seat. Arian sat near the center of the table this time, not at the head. His mother took her usual place at the end. Leora opened her laptop, connected to the screen, loaded the report. She didn't scan the room for reactions. She didn't need to. Her numbers would do the talking. "This report outlines a full internal breakdown of the PR division," she said. Slide 1, missing authorizations. Slide 2, misuse of budget lines. Slide 3, contracts signed without cross-departmental approval. The room shifted. Uncomfortable. Quiet. Necessary. Her voice never rose. She pointed to flaws, not people, presented solutions, not blame. When someone interrupted, she paused until the silence returned. And when Arian's mother attempted to explain one decision, Leora gently cut her off. "I'm not here to debate. I'm here to deliver clarity." Silence. Arian watched her closely. He didn't interrupt. He didn't defend. He didn't protect his family. Because this time, she didn't need protection. She was the authority in the room. An hour in, Leora turned off the screen, closed her laptop. The full recovery plan includes transparency in monthly expense summaries, redefined approval, chains, and the transfer of oversight to a neutral partner for the next 2 quarters, she said. Then, calmly, "I recommend full compliance to avoid deeper exposure." It was not a threat. It was a professional courtesy. She stood, gathered her documents. The room remained still. Except for Arian's mother. She slowly lifted her hand. "Miss Halen," she said. Leora paused. "I'd like a private word." "Please." The room stilled further. Everyone knew what this was. Not a request for clarity, but something else. Leora glanced at Celeste, then back at the table. "I'll allow 5 minutes." She stepped into the smaller conference room just off the boardroom. His mother followed. Closed the door. The silence between them stretched for 4 seconds. Then 5. Then, "I judged you," his mother said quietly. Leora said nothing. "I saw where you came from, and I decided you couldn't belong in our world." Still, Leora stayed quiet. His mother's voice softened. "I didn't see your steadiness, your clarity, your value. I didn't need you to," Leora finally said. His mother looked surprised. "I needed to see it in myself," she added. "And I did." A long pause followed. Then, "We need your help," his mother said. "Please don't let this collapse." Her voice, for the first time, held no polish, no performance, only sincerity. Leora nodded once. "I've already agreed to support the project. I don't confuse business with emotion." "I understand." Leora turned to leave. But before she opened the door, she paused. "Power," she said quietly, "isn't in who speaks the most. It's in who doesn't need to speak to be heard." Then she walked out, and left Arian's mother staring at the door in silence. Celeste glanced up as Leora exited the room. "All good?" she asked. Leora nodded once. "I'm ready for the next meeting." Celeste smiled. "You're unshakable." "Not unshakable," Leora said, "just no longer dependent." Arian stood near the elevator as she approached. She didn't slow down, but he spoke before she passed. "You're different." She stopped, looked at him. "No," she said, "I'm the same. You're just seeing me clearly now." And with that, she stepped into the elevator. Didn't look back. Didn't need to, because she wasn't walking away from anything anymore. She was simply walking forward. Arian stayed near the elevator long after Leora left. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't smiled. She hadn't hesitated. And still, She shook something loose inside him that hadn't moved in months. He walked back to his office, but the walls felt tighter now. The framed awards looked dull. The view out the window, once a source of pride, now felt like distance. He remembered the night she used to sit on his couch, wearing fuzzy socks, eating pasta out of a deep ceramic bowl, laughing with her head slightly tilted. She had never asked him to be perfect, just present, and he had failed her in the quietest, most unforgivable way by staying seated when she needed him to stand. Later that week, he received a message from one of the board advisors, requesting your presence on a financial steering call audit response. Lead analyst from the partner firm will be present. He didn't have to ask who the analyst was. He joined the call. Leora led the briefing. Her voice didn't falter. Based on internal projections, she said, you're operating 18% over on PR costs for third quarter. I've highlighted the factors causing the inflation and submitted 3 recommended cuts. The board listened closely. Arian didn't speak. He watched how they responded to her. She wasn't an outsider anymore. They didn't question her credibility. They didn't interrupt. They followed her lead. Her slides were clear, her facts sharp. Her tone remained steady, even when one of the older partners pushed back on her conclusions. She didn't flinch. She pulled up a line chart, walked them through it, pointed out the same patterns in their own numbers. The room fell quiet, and Arian realized something. She didn't just belong in their world now. She was becoming essential to it. After the call, the board chair sent a follow-up email to Celeste. Her accuracy is saving us from another quarter of damage. We'd like to recommend her for ongoing advisory. Celeste forwarded the message to Leora with a short note. They're asking for you, not us. Leora stared at the screen, not with pride, but with peace. She replied, let's take the meeting. I'll stay objective. The next time Arian saw her in person was at a strategy session held off-site, a private property the company used for long-form meetings. He arrived late. She was already seated at the front of the room, laptop open, presentation loaded. He took a seat off to the side, near the window. The session started without introduction. She didn't acknowledge him, not because she was cold, but because she didn't need to. Her work filled the space between them. Her words shaped the discussion. And every time someone doubted her numbers, she had answers. He watched the men, who once walked past her in hallways, now take notes while she spoke. He watched the woman his mother said didn't fit the table now lead it. And all he could do was listen. Because she wasn't trying to prove anything. She was just doing what she always knew how to do. She was steady. And that steadiness was becoming the foundation under everyone's feet. During a short break, Arian stood outside near the terrace, phone in hand, unread messages piling up. He didn't scroll, didn't call anyone. He looked out over the city skyline and wondered how long it would take to rebuild the trust he'd broken. If ever. He heard the soft click of a door opening behind him. Leora stepped out with a cup of tea. She didn't see him at first, or maybe she did, and chose not to react. She stood by the railing, back straight, eyes fixed ahead. He stepped forward slightly. I never apologized properly, he said. She didn't look at him. You did enough by staying silent when I needed you most. He nodded. I didn't think I'd lose you that night, he said. You didn't lose me that night, she replied. You lost me in the moment you looked around the table, then chose not to move. Her voice didn't carry bitterness, only truth. She turned to him slowly. But it's not about that anymore. Then what is it about? He asked. She took a breath. It's about knowing who you are when no one's watching, and being that person even when the room turns against you. He swallowed. And you think I'm not that man? I think I was that woman long before you noticed. Silence. Then she walked past him. Not angry, not triumphant, just steady, as always. Later that evening, Celeste pulled Leora aside after the meeting wrapped. They want to bring you in long-term, she said. 2-year advisory, full control on financial recovery strategy. Leora didn't react right away. Celeste added, they trust you now more than they trust each other. Leora nodded. I'll do it. But, Celeste asked. Leora met her eyes. But I'm not here to save their legacy. I'm here to protect the integrity of the numbers. Celeste smiled, spoken like someone who doesn't need validation anymore. Leora smiled back. I stopped needing it the moment I started listening to myself more than the room. The meeting had ended 20 minutes ago. Executives had gathered their files. Small groups lingered in the hallway, discussing follow-ups and next steps. Leora stood near the glass wall, reviewing charts on her tablet, waiting for Celeste to return from a side conversation. That's when she heard her name. Miss Halen. She turned. Arian's mother stood behind her, polished, controlled, still the image of elite poise, but something in her face had shifted. There was no condescension in her voice, no guarded expression behind the tone, just a quiet edge of uncertainty. "May I speak with you privately?" she asked. Leora paused, then gave a single nod. She followed the woman into a smaller, unoccupied conference room. A rectangular table, 2 chairs, one long window overlooking the parking lot. Leora didn't sit, neither did she. They stood facing one another, 2 women on opposite sides of a history only one of them had chosen. There was a long pause. Then, "I want to apologize," Arian's mother said. Leora didn't interrupt. "I was wrong," she continued, "about who you were, about what you brought to that room, and to him." Leora watched her carefully. "I assumed," she said, voice low, "that you were a distraction, temporary, someone too gentle for this world." Still, Leora said nothing. "I didn't understand," she admitted. "You weren't gentle. You were composed, and I mistook your restraint for weakness," Leora replied softly, "because that's what women like me get labeled when we don't shout." Arian's mother nodded once. Leora added, "You didn't ask who I was. You judged where I came from, and then you called it clarity." Her voice wasn't angry. It was firm, clear. Arian's mother blinked. "I see that now." Leora waited, then said, "So why are you here?" Arian's mother breathed in slowly. "Because we need your help." There it was, the weight, the admission. She continued, "Our public trust is slipping. Investors are hesitant. The city liaison is requesting direct accountability. My name, our name, isn't enough anymore." "And what do you want from me?" Leora asked, though she already knew. "Truthfully, to steady what we've disrupted, to restore what we've unraveled. But beyond that, your calm, your clarity, your reputation. You command respect now in rooms that don't listen to many." Leora stepped closer, not threatening but direct. "Your family made it very clear I didn't belong." Arian's mother nodded. "And that's exactly why you're the only one who can help us now." That admission landed heavier than any apology. Because it wasn't flattery. It was truth. Leora didn't move, didn't soften. She let the moment sit, then said, "I'm not here to comfort your mistakes." "I'm not asking you to," the woman said quickly. "I'm only asking for fairness." "I always offered that," Leora said, "even when you didn't." Another pause. Then, "You'll have it," Leora finished. "Because it's my job. But I won't pretend your change of heart redeems the damage." "I understand." Leora nodded once. "Then we're done." She turned to leave. Arian's mother remained still, watching her. And in that moment, for the first time, she looked at Leora not as a woman beneath her, but as one beyond her reach. Outside the room, Celeste waited. "You okay?" she asked as they walked to the elevator. "Better than okay," Leora said. "I've never been clearer." Celeste raised an eyebrow. "I take it the apology came." "Yes. And I accepted it, but didn't absorb it," Celeste guessed. Leora smiled. "Exactly." That evening, Leora stood in her kitchen, phone on the counter, rice, simmering, soft jazz playing through a speaker tucked near the window. She lit a single candle, not for effect, for herself. And while she stirred the pot, she thought about how full circle life could be. The woman who once asked her to leave now stood in front of her, asking for support. The table that once mocked her now held its breath when she entered. The man who once failed to choose her now watched as others chose her over and over again, not for love, but for leadership, and that, more than anything, told her she had done the right thing, not by leaving, but by never going back. Leora's final recovery plan was built like her, clear, grounded, stripped of anything unnecessary. Her presentation slides didn't include dramatic projections or promises. They held facts, deadlines, solutions. Her delivery wasn't showy. She didn't make eye contact for effect. She looked at the data, then the people, then the next problem. Each answer landed with calm finality. Each recommendation came with backup strategy, risk assessments, and a reason. Celeste sat to her left, silent, smiling just enough. Arian sat across from her, still, listening without interruption. Even his mother, the same woman who once used polished smiles as weapons, leaned forward without a single rebuttal. Leora had the room, not because she demanded it, because she had earned it. "We'll need 3 internal reviews before the year closes," she said, "all tied to financial transparency and operational restructure. If that doesn't happen, the city will back out." She clicked to the final slide. Recovery isn't just about optics, it's about discipline. Silence. Then one board member said, "I second full approval." Another followed, agreed. His sister said nothing, but her nod came slower. Humbled. Arian's mother spoke last. "We support the plan." Unanimously, Leora closed her laptop. She stood. She didn't smile. She didn't pause. She said only this: "You'll receive written summaries and accountability maps within 48 hours. Then she gathered her things and left the room. No long exit. No lingering. Just closure, in its quietest form. She stepped into the elevator alone. Button pressed. Doors closed. By the time she reached the ground floor, her pulse remained steady. She wasn't relieved. She wasn't triumphant. She was simply done. She walked toward the building's glass exit, sunlight stretching long across the lobby tiles. And just before she reached the doors, she heard his voice. "Leora." She turned. Arian stood at a respectful distance, his hands in his pockets, his eyes uncertain for the first time in years. She didn't move. He stepped forward. "I know I don't have the right to say this." She held up one hand gently. "You don't." His shoulders dropped slightly, but he didn't walk away. "I've watched you walk into every room like you built it," he said quietly. "And maybe that's what made losing you harder than anything else." Leora's expression didn't shift. "I don't need to hear what you regret," she said softly. "I know. I don't need you to name what you lost. I won't." She tilted her head. "Then why are you here?" He looked down, then back at her. "To tell you, if I ever have the honor of being in your life again, it won't be on my terms. It'll be on yours." Leora looked at him, not with softness, not with contempt, just with honesty. "You once asked me to leave in front of people who never respected me," she said. "Now those same people are asking for my guidance." "I know," he said. "And I'm still not asking for anything from you." He nodded slowly. "I'm not here to ask," he said. "Just to say I see you now. Fully." She paused. "I'm not angry, Arian. I believe you. I'm not coming back." He swallowed. "I wouldn't expect you to." "I'm healing," she said. "And that healing didn't happen because someone finally apologized. It happened because I stopped needing one." He looked at her like he was memorizing everything he couldn't touch. And then she said, "If we cross paths again, we'll see what life decides. But I won't lose myself again trying to be understood." She turned, pushed the door open, and walked out into the sunlight. He didn't follow, not because he didn't want to, but because he respected her space more than he respected his hope. And in that moment, for the first time since the night she left his family's table in silence, Arian Valtor understood the true meaning of love. It wasn't what you held on to. It was what you didn't stand in the way of when it finally stood on its own. By fall, Leora was no longer the woman who led the audit. She was the strategist being requested by name. Other firms started reaching out. She turned most of them down. Not because she lacked ambition, but because she understood the value of peace. Her current role gave her room to breathe. Her evenings remained hers. She still cooked dinner alone, still lit candles, still played soft jazz or slow piano while reading case files. But now, she did it with full ownership of her rhythm, her calendar, her name. People stopped mistaking her silence for weakness. They understood it now as precision. One weekend, she was invited to speak at a women's leadership brunch hosted downtown. She didn't arrive in heels. She didn't wear red. She chose a navy dress, flat shoes, hair pulled back tight. And when she stood to speak, she didn't tell a dramatic story. She told the truth. "I'm not here because I clawed my way through 100 locked doors," she said. "I'm here because, when the wrong room tried to make me feel invisible, I left, and chose not to come back." Applause didn't follow instantly. It settled in slowly, like the sound of people realizing they'd just heard something honest, something they needed. Across the city, Arian scrolled past a post from the event. Someone had taken a photo, Leora standing with her hand gently resting on a podium, a soft smile on her face. He paused, not out of regret, out of admiration. He zoomed in slightly, then stopped. He didn't like it to notify her. He didn't comment. He just stared at the image a little longer than necessary, then locked his phone, because he knew now she was no longer part of his daily story. She was the lesson he carried in silence, and that silence wasn't punishment. It was the consequence of not moving when he should have. His work continued, but his energy didn't. He went to meetings, approved budgets, traveled when necessary. But nothing felt as alive as it used to, because the one person who once reminded him what presence felt like had built her life without needing him. And he respected that. He'd had his chance, and he'd failed the test, not with cruelty, but with quiet abandonment, the worst kind. One night, he returned home after a late board meeting. He walked past the bar cart without pouring anything, sat by the balcony, looked out over the city skyline, and pulled out a small envelope he'd kept tucked in a drawer for months. It was a photo. She wasn't looking at the camera. She was standing in the corner of his old apartment, pouring tea into a white mug, laughing at something he'd said. He'd taken the picture quietly. Now it felt like a window into a life he could no longer touch. He didn't frame it, didn't hold it close. He just looked at it, then folded it again and placed it back in the drawer. Some loves don't get second chapters, and that truth hurt. But he honored it, because she had honored herself. Leora didn't know how often he thought of her, didn't wonder. She didn't walk with questions anymore, only clarity. She started mentoring younger women at her firm, not with grand speeches, with quiet lunches, with calm feedback, with steady encouragement. She wrote an essay once, just one, titled, "I didn't walk out to make a statement, only to keep my peace." It was published in a small business magazine and quietly went viral in niche leadership circles, not for drama, but for its simplicity, its steadiness. It sounded like her, and that was enough. She didn't attach her photo to it. She didn't need to be seen anymore. She only needed to be true. And she was, every step forward, every new day, every soft night that ended with her in bed, candles low, book half read, knowing she had lost something once, but never herself. It started like any other Tuesday. Leora stopped by the corner bakery near her office. She liked their grain bread. She liked how the cashier smiled without asking questions. She liked the rhythm of that block, 3 shops, 1 bookstore, and a flower cart with no name. She didn't expect to see Arian standing near the refrigerated section, holding a bottle of water and reading the nutrition label like it might change his life. He didn't see her at first, and maybe, in another life, she would have walked past and stayed invisible. But today, she didn't flinch. She walked right past him and stood by the fresh bread. She picked her usual loaf, and when she turned, he was there, still tall, still composed, but not as tightly wound as before. He looked tired, not broken, just real. "Hi," he said, voice low. She nodded. "Hi." Neither moved, neither smiled, but neither turned away either. "You look well," he added. "I am," she said. "You?" He hesitated. "Working, traveling, still rebuilding?" He nodded. "Yes, but some things you don't rebuild, you just carry them." She understood. He didn't mean the company. He meant her. She placed her loaf into her basket. "It's been a while." He nodded. "Longer than I planned, shorter than I deserve." Silence sat between them. Then she said, "You don't need to perform here, Arian. This isn't a stage." "I know." "Then speak plain." So he did. "I was afraid you'd ruin me if I admitted I was wrong," he said quietly. "Now I know you already saved me once, and I wasted it." Leora didn't blink. "That sounds honest," she said. "It is, but that version of me doesn't live in your world anymore." "I know." And she never needed an apology. She needed space to keep her peace. Arian swallowed and nodded. She wasn't being cruel. She was being clear. That was the difference now. He looked down at the bottle in his hand. "Would it be wrong if I asked how your mother is?" he asked. Leora tilted her head slightly, surprised. "She's good," she said. "Settled in with my aunt. Still overfeeding everyone." He gave a small laugh. "I remember." Then added, "She never liked me much. She didn't dislike you. She just saw too much of my silence when I was around you." That landed like a rock on his chest. He didn't argue, didn't defend. He just nodded again. "You were always honest," he said. "I just didn't know how to hear it." Leora looked him in the eye. Some people don't listen until they lose the privilege of being spoken to. She didn't raise her voice, didn't change her tone. But Arian felt it, because it was the truth. And truth no longer needed to be shouted to be felt. They walked out of the store together, not as friends, not as enemies, just two people who once tried and failed. He stopped before she turned the corner. "Can I say something selfish?" he asked. Leora waited. "I hope you find someone who never makes you question your value. But if that person ever fumbles it, I hope they don't get the same grace I did." That surprised her, because it wasn't possessive. It wasn't guilt-driven. It was regret, clean and clear. She didn't smile, but she nodded, then walked away. Not faster, not colder, just forward. That evening, Arian opened the essay she'd published. He read it twice. Then again. He didn't cry, but he sat with it like a man who'd missed something priceless. Not because he didn't see it, but because he didn't honor it in time. And now the world did, and she stood taller than ever, without his name beside hers. And maybe that was the best possible ending to a story that could have gone wrong in so many ways, because she survived him, and she never had to prove she belonged in his world. She made a new one, where the seat at the table was hers by design, not invitation. The elevator ride felt different this time. No nerves, no pounding heart, no trembling fingers fixing her hem. Leora stood tall in a navy suit that didn't need shine to carry authority. Her heels clicked softly on the polished floor, steady and calm. The same building that once felt like a cathedral of hierarchy now looked like what it was: glass, steel, and titles that meant less than action. She wasn't there as staff. She wasn't there for Arian. She was there for herself, and she had something they needed. The receptionist recognized her. Eyes widened, jaw almost dropped. But Leora didn't stop. She walked past, up the stairs, straight into the executive boardroom. Inside, the room fell quiet. Some of the same faces from that unforgettable evening months ago, when she'd been dismissed, in front of wine glasses and fake smiles, now turned toward her with awkward half-nods. Some stood. Some didn't know if they should. The chairman cleared his throat. "Miss Royce, thank you for coming." She took her seat, not at the edge, not against the wall, but directly at the table. She laid her folder on the surface and looked around. Arian walked in last. He froze when he saw her. His eyes held no arrogance now, just quiet awe, and maybe the smallest sting of something deeper. Regret? Respect? Maybe both. But Leora didn't flinch. She looked at the chairman. "You asked for a market strategy that could reverse your fourth-quarter decline," she said. "I brought more than that." She clicked the remote. The screen lit up, and Leora began to speak. Her voice wasn't loud, but every word landed. Every slide she showed made one thing clear. She understood their weak points, their missed opportunities, and their blind spots better than their own analysts. And she had solutions, not hypothetical ones, real ones, grounded, strategic, executable. When one board member asked about projected growth, she answered with numbers. When another challenged her positioning on consumer retention, she presented case studies with measurable outcomes. She didn't apologize for knowing more. She didn't soften her presence. She taught. And they listened, even Arian, especially Arian. By the end of the presentation, the room stayed quiet longer than usual. Then, softly, one of the older board members, someone who hadn't spoken much, said, "Where were you when we hired 3 different consultants and none gave us this clarity?" Leora looked him in the eye. "I was walking past this building, reminding myself I didn't need your invitation to be valuable." No one spoke, not even Arian. The same room where she was once humiliated was now silent in the presence of her competence. And she didn't need to say, "Look at me now." They already were. The chairman finally leaned forward. "Miss Royce, would you consider a long-term role as our lead strategy consultant?" There it was, the offer, the official olive branch. Leora didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She only asked one question. "Will I be allowed to speak freely, even when it makes you uncomfortable?" The chairman paused, then nodded. "You'll be expected to." She nodded once. "I'll send my terms by morning." And that was it. She stood, gathered her folder, and turned to leave. Before she walked out, Arian stood. She paused, not out of emotion, but because she knew he would speak. And she wanted to hear what it would sound like. He stepped forward. "Leora, can I walk you out?" She looked at him, then turned her eyes to the room behind her. "No. You stay," she said quietly. "You're still learning." She walked out, not slowly, not rushed, just steady, exactly how she'd come in. And this time, the door didn't close behind her. It stayed open, because they knew they might need her again. And this time, it would be on her terms. Same buildings, same wind brushing through the trees. But Leora had. She stepped into her apartment with quiet ease. No rush to take off her heels. No need to prove anything to anyone. Her mother sat on the small couch, glasses low on her nose, knitting something soft and warm. She looked up. "You're back early." Leora nodded, setting her bag down. It didn't take long. Her mother didn't ask what happened. She didn't need to. She simply smiled and said, "I'm proud of you." Leora sat beside her, folding her hands in her lap. "They asked me to come back." As they should. They asked for long-term consulting. Her mother leaned back. "And I said I'd send my terms." A quiet pause. Then her mother reached for her hand. "You don't have to say yes to power, baby. Say yes to peace. Say yes to presence. Say yes to what gives you breath, not what steals it." Leora's eyes softened. She didn't cry. She didn't need to. She was grounded now. Whole. Later that night, she opened her laptop. Not for the firm, not for projections, but for herself. She began typing the first draft of something new. A letter to the version of her that had sat in that dining room, ashamed, silent, almost broken. She wrote, "You didn't lose anything that day. You walked away with everything they couldn't see. And one day, they'd watch you stand in the place they tried to shrink you from. Not because you fought them, but because you refused to fight yourself. Keep walking. Peace looks good on you." She saved it. 2 days later, her inbox pinged. The board had agreed to her terms. All of them. But that wasn't what made her smile. It was the message from someone else, from a woman she once worked beside in the HR department, someone who'd watched Leora walk out that night in silence. The message read, "You gave me permission to leave what I thought I had to endure. I'm starting my own coaching service now. I thought you should know you helped me choose me." Leora closed her laptop gently. Weeks passed. She didn't take every call. She didn't rush into every meeting. She worked, yes, but on her own rhythm. Sometimes from her kitchen table. Sometimes from a quiet coffee shop 2 blocks down. She met clients who didn't care about pedigree but trusted her clarity. She didn't sell ambition. She offered strategy wrapped in stillness. One evening she met with a woman who ran a shelter for displaced single mothers. The woman said, "I've been trying to organize their financials for months. Everyone I hire speaks too fast and listens too little." Leora smiled. "I speak soft and listen well." She helped them, not for press, not for performance, but because she remembered the days when her own mother had held together a life with 2 hands and no backup. Arian reached out again, not for business, for conversation. "Can we talk?" She met him in a public space, an open park with benches and kids running nearby. He arrived in casual clothes, not a suit, not a tie. He sat beside her and looked out at the trees. "I watched you in that room, and I realized I never really saw you before." Leora didn't respond. He went on, "You deserved better, and I want to apologize, not just for the words I said, but for the way I let you carry all the weight of my silence." She finally looked at him. "I don't hate you, Arian. I never did. But I also don't need you." His face fell softly. "That's fair." She stood. "Walk in peace, Arian. And next time you meet someone strong, don't try to understand them with ego. Listen with your heart." She left him sitting there, quiet, humbled, and alone with what he now knew. Months later, Leora stood outside a small new office space, a place she'd rented on her own. No funding, no inheritance, no last name to carry her. Just strategy, clarity, and calm presence. The sign outside read, "Royce & Company, Strategy for Sustainable Impact." She turned the key, walked in, and breathed. No noise, no show, just light through clean windows and a desk that faced the sun. That was all she needed, because the world that once pushed her out now watched her rebuild, not with rage, but with rhythm and power rooted in stillness. What if strength wasn't loud? What if power didn't look like revenge, but like peace? Leora didn't scream. She didn't plot. She didn't beg to be seen. She stood. She left. She healed quietly and built something stronger than their approval. She didn't just rise. She chose how she rose. And when the same people who laughed, dismissed, and looked down on her came back with open hands, she didn't meet them with bitterness. She met them with boundaries, not to punish, but to protect the peace she fought for. Have you ever walked away, not because you lost, but because you finally saw your worth? Have you ever outgrown the room that once tried to shrink you? This story isn't about revenge. It's about release. It's about building the life you were always worthy of, whether they applaud or not. If Leora's journey moved you, made you think of someone who's been overlooked, silenced, or pushed aside, share this video with them. Leave a comment below and tell us, what would you do if you were in her shoes? And if you believe in stories that show healing, quiet strength, and real redemption, tap subscribe. Because on Mr. Charles Stories, we don't just tell stories. We remind you of the power you already have, even when the world forgets to see it. We'll see you in the next one.